Just picture it now in your mind. It's the 9th of June, 2007, and you are having the absolute pants scared off you by some statues. Blink is an episode no one will forget soon, but did you know these things? I'm Sean Ferrick with Who Culture, and here are 20 things you didn't know about Blink. Number 20. The title wasn't decided until production began. Every episode of Doctor Who needs a title. It's a running joke among fans that these usually end up being something of the something or something and the something, and initially Blink also used that format. Due to some tight scheduling, there was just one script meeting for this episode. It was originally called Sally Sparrow and the Weeping Angels, but showrunner Russell T Davies didn't like that title, so Stephen Moffat offered some alternatives, one of which caught Russell T Davies' eye. No pun intended. RTD was captivated by the idea of calling the episode Blink, and instructed Moffat to go back through the script and add the word in as many times as possible, like a cheesy 50s movie trailer. Moffat obliged, and the word blink is heard over 20 times throughout the episode. Number 19. The TARDIS being rocked was surprisingly simple to film. In the episode's grand climax, Sally and Larry finally enter the TARDIS after being pursued by a group of weeping angels. There's just one problem: the angels also want to get in. The Stone Assassins proceed to violently rock the TARDIS back and forth as Sally and Larry get flung around the inside. Those interior shots were a lot easier to film than you might think. Rather than moving the set or doing anything complicated, the actors were instructed to simply throw themselves around the TARDIS. The camera operator would then tilt the other way, giving the impression that the whole interior is being violently shaken. You don't have to break the bank to produce some TV magic. Number 18. David Tennant recorded his lines all by himself. Even though David Tennant isn't in Blink very much, he's still on top form and went to great lengths to give the best performance possible. To recreate the half-conversation the Doctor has with Sally, Tennant recorded his lines in a room on his own without having Carrie Mulligan to bounce off. Don't ever say he didn't suffer for his art. From a scripting standpoint, this conversation also presented in a rather lonely manner. Moffat wrote the full conversation, removed Sally's lines, and then handed the Doctor's lines to Tennant, believing that this would make his acting feel more authentic. Number 17. Moffat didn't know how to defeat the angels. For all his amazing work on Doctor Who, Stephen Moffat's greatest legacy might be the creation of the Weeping Angels. He maybe tarnished their reputation slightly with some of the additions to their lore in Series 5 and Series 7, but this insistence on fleshing them out was understandable, considering how difficult it was to write them the first time round. While writing Blink, Moffat couldn't actually think of a way to defeat the angels. He'd written himself into a corner. How were these almighty hunters going to be stopped without the Doctor being there? He even asked Mark Gatiss for help with the ending. That was probably just an excuse for those two to hang out. Just kiss already. In the end, Moffat came up with the angels stood around the four walls of the TARDIS solution after realizing that his script notes made a point of there being only 4 angels in the episode. Number 16. The opening nighttime scene was shot in broad daylight. Filming at night must be a total pain in the backside. Not only is everything pitch black, but you've also got to organise dozens of people to be somewhere at an unsociable hour. It being filmed in England, it was also probably raining. That might be why the Doctor Who team opted to film the opening of Blink in the middle of the day, despite the fact it's set during the dark of night. As recounted by composer Murray Gold on the DVD commentary, the scene where Sally discovers the writing on the wall in the mysterious Wester Drumlin's house was a lot brighter to begin with. Colour grading was used to make everything seem darker, and despite a few moments where the lighting looks a little off, the effect is unnoticeable. Number 15. It was the least watched episode of Series 3. For such a legendary episode, you'd think that Blink would have smashed all kinds of rating records, right? But in actual fact, the exact opposite is true. While by no means a ratings disaster, Blink drew an audience of 6.62 million viewers. That's the sort of number most TV shows would kill for, but when compared to its fellow Season 3 episodes, Blink was the least watched of the lot. The most viewed episode of the series, if you discount the Christmas special, was the opener Smith and Jones, with 8.71 million viewers. Blink's nearest competition was Daleks in Manhattan, with an audience of 6.69 million. Were audience put off by the fact that the Doctor was barely in this episode? If they were, then it was their loss. Number 14. The unusual way the Weeping Angel actresses stayed still. One of the most menacing parts about the angels is their stillness. Their ability to disguise themselves as statues means they can blend in almost anywhere. By the time you notice that they've moved, it's far too late. The only problem with this concept was finding performers who were willing and able to stay motionless for that long, but luckily the costume department had a plan to help that process along. The angels were brought to life by special effects guru Neil Gorton. The bottom half of the costume was made from skirts of stiff rubber, and underneath he included a bicycle seat stuck to a pole, so performers could stand perfectly still during shooting. This was an ingenious design choice that worked incredibly well, in fact a little too well. Gorton recalled an incident where a runner asked an angel performer what they wanted for lunch, only to discover they'd been talking to a statue prop the entire time. Number 13. Banto is watching a real BBC show. You'd be forgiven for forgetting that Banto was even a character in this episode. He's the owner of the DVD store where Larry works. It's here where Sally is given a list of DVDs containing the Doctor's Easter eggs. When we first meet Banto, he's watching something on TV instead of talking to his customers. Great business decision. He's watching a real TV show called Gangsters, which ran for 2 seasons in the 70s on the BBC and then vanished from the cultural eye for good. The other DVD covers and posters in the store were all made up, with the crew going to painstaking efforts to make the store seem populated. Number 12. The Weeping Angels eventually escaped. Blink's iconic ending reveals the Doctor knew exactly how to defeat the Angels without even being there. The Angels surround the Tardis as it dematerializes, leaving all 4 of them gazing into each other's eyes, permanently unable to move. Or so we thought. Fast forward to 2021 and to the excellent Doctor Who game, The Lonely Assassins. The game starts with the player finding an abandoned phone containing all sorts of links to the events of Blink. With the help of unit agent Petronella Osgood and Larry himself, the player must stop the Angels from Blink, which have somehow managed to break free. How exactly? Well, that would be spoiling the game now, wouldn't it? Number 11. Young Billy and Old Billy were almost played by the same actor. Even though he only appeared in a handful of scenes, Billy Shipton left a memorable mark on Doctor Who. After showing Sally the West of Drumlin's collection and asking her out, Billy is sent back in time by the Angels and ends up playing a key role in getting the Doctor's information to Sally in the future. We see Billy in 2 different forms, one where he's young and one where he's old. The original plan was to make actor Michael Obiora to look older to play his aged self until Russell T Davies stepped in. Davis, along with producer Phil Collinson, felt that audiences would find it harder to invest in old Billy's plight if they could see he was played by an actor in makeup. Everyone agreed, so veteran performer Louis Mahoney was brought in as old Billy. Number 10. Moffat was surprisingly relaxed while writing the episode. Being a writer isn't an easy job, especially on Doctor Who. You're constantly under pressure to come up with new characters, aliens, and locations, and you have to cram everything into a tight 45-minute package. Surprisingly then, Moffat has admitted he felt quite relaxed while writing Blink, stating that, "I figured the pressure was off because I was writing the unpopular one without the Doctor in it." Basically, if he didn't like Blink, well, that's because it's a Doctor Light story. And no, Russell, you can't use that same defense for Love and Monsters. Number 9. Why the Weeping Angel threw a rock at Sally. Going back to the opening scene now, and to the strange writing hidden beneath the wallpaper that tells Sally to duck, she eventually does and narrowly avoids being struck in the head by a big old rock. The thrower, the very first Weeping Angel to be shown in a Doctor Who episode. But why would an alien assassin that can move so quickly need to resort to such a savage form of attack? The answer, according to Moffat on the DVD commentary, was because the angel just wanted an easier victim. A lot of people have asked me, who threw the rock? The Weeping Angel threw the rock. Because of the particular MO of the Weeping Angel, and its ability to move while you see it, it is of course to their advantage to render their victims insensible. Considering that the Angels in Blink aren't at full strength, the 11th Doctor describes them as scavengers in Season 5, this does make some sense. Number 8. Sally's conversation with the Doctor was the hardest thing to write. Thanks to Billy's help, the Doctor is eventually able to have a conversation with Sally. Well, not really a conversation, you know what I mean. The scene is the linchpin of the entire episode. It's where Sally discovers what she needs to do, and it's where the Doctor reveals key information about the Angels, and most importantly of all, it's where the timey-wimey line comes from. Moffat knew full well just how important this scene was, and he struggled to get it bang on. He made several attempts to get it right before landing on the dialogue we all know and love today. He was also worried that this moment would be a huge disappointment, but hey, Stephen, it wasn't. Number 7. The much darker alternate ending. Despite being one of the scariest episodes of Doctor Who, Blink ends on a rather happy note. The Doctor and Martha are saved, Sally and Larry get all cozy, and all is right with the world. But this wasn't always how it was going to be. A large part of Sally's character is that she's fixated on the past, and Moffat revealed in an interview that she very nearly got her wish to live in a different time. Moffat wanted the episode to end with an angel ambushing Sally in the DVD store. Larry would then enter to find his new squeeze gone, only to notice her waving at him from a painting on the wall. Aside from being extremely bleak, this ending also doesn't feel right for Doctor Who, which is a show about hope and love. And while we're on the subject of happier endings, number 6. Sally was initially pregnant at the episode's end. Blink isn't just about Sally taking on the Angels, it's also about her getting it on with her dead friend's brother. Presumably, Sally Sparrow and Larry Nightingale bonded over having bird-related surnames. Hopefully they didn't go double-barreled though when they got married. To really drive their romance home, Moffat originally wrote Sally to be pregnant at the end of the episode. However, this was changed because Moffat wanted to show the couple getting together after Sally met with the Doctor and Martha, thus concluding her business with the Angels. Number 5. Weeping Angels often attack people who are sleeping. We've mentioned the Blink DVD commentary a couple of times already, and for the most part it's an insightful look into the writing and production of the episode. But then there were also a handful of useless yet entertaining nuggets like this one. While having a chat about the Angels, Murray Gold asked Moffat if they often prey on sleeping humans. Quick as a flash, Moffat says yes, because sleeping humans make for incredibly easy victims. Why waste your time chasing after a conscious person when you can sleep up on someone that's in the land of Nod? Moffat also adds that missing people are people who slept in the vicinity of a weeping angel. Thanks for the nightmares, mate. Number 4. Billy Shipton and the Curious Bird Patch. Easter eggs are a crucial part of Billy Shipton's journey and the episode as a whole, so it shouldn't come as a surprise that there's one woven into his very character. When we first meet Billy, he's wearing a leather jacket with a patch sewn into its left arm. What's the patch? A bird. Could this be a sparrow, a nod to the woman who would be at his deathbed? Could it be a nightingale, the surname of the man who would take his place at her side? Could it be a swallow, which has nothing to do with the story, but it is the bird that most resembles the one on the patch? Bird experts? Let us know. Number 3. The Angels attacking the Tardis was shortened at the last minute. Right before Sally and Larry trick the Angels into staring at each other, they're chased into the Tardis by a horde of fanged beasts. This chase sequence was brought to life in spectacular fashion. The shots of the Angels slowly advancing on their human prey are terrifying, which must have been a huge relief to the editor who spent hours poring over the footage. This part of the episode was one of the trickiest to nail. The pacing of the sequence was absolutely crucial, and it took several back and forths to get it just right. It was originally longer than it ended up being, with the decision to cut it down coming right at the last minute. Definitely the right call considering the effectiveness of the end result. Number 2. Only 2 statue props were used during filming. Great horror writers have a knack for taking something ordinary and turning it into an object of pure fear, so Moffat transformed every single statue in the world into a relentless demon hell-bent on ruining people's lives. Considering that the Angels are statues that only move off-screen, you'd think that the majority of them would be props that are naturally still. But as we previously mentioned, the Angels were largely brought to life by actors, and in fact only 2 angel props were used during production. The 2 fake angels were one with its arms outstretched and one with its hands over its eyes. Every other angel you see was played by those poor performers on bike seats that we talked about earlier. It's a testament to the skill of everyone involved that you can never tell which one is which. Number 1. The Doctor's final scene was incredibly weird on purpose. When the Doctor does finally show up in this episode, it's before his events have actually occurred. Well, for him at least. Time travel's confusing. Here, the Doctor and Martha are in the middle of a very strange adventure. They're carrying bows and arrows, there's talk of a migration of some sort, and they're apparently fighting a lizard. Okay. Well, the insanity was all Moffat's doing, as he wrote this final scene to be as strange as possible and threw in all these disparate elements just to dial up the kookiness. So no, there isn't a deeper meaning here, or something significant about this off-screen adventure, it's just a Scottish writer in a particularly silly mood.
Now that we're in the 60th year of Doctor Who and are patiently awaiting the arrival of the highly anticipated anniversary specials, it seems like a good time to take a trip down memory lane. It's hard to believe, but 10 years have passed since the Day of the Doctor. 10. So we thought we'd look back and explore some of the best details, trivia and behind the scenes stories you might not know. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie with Who Culture here with 20 things you didn't know about the Day of the Doctor. Number 20. The Night of the Doctor wasn't released as intended. Prior to the airing of The Day of the Doctor, a prequel titled The Night of the Doctor was released. In a wonderful surprise, it featured Paul McGann reprising the role of the 8th Doctor, and finally gave him the on-screen regeneration he'd previously lacked. The initial plan was for The Night of the Doctor to be released on the 16th of November 2013, 1 week before the main episode premiered. However, when it was discovered that McGann's involvement was about to be leaked, it was made available on the 14th of November instead. This meant that it actually dropped on Paul McGann's birthday, which was certainly a happy coincidence. Number 19. John Hurt didn't audition for his role. Any actor's dream is to become so well established that they are offered roles on the spot without the need to audition. Of course, this is not usually the case, and those audition processes are key to discovering breakout talent, Matt Smith and Karen Gillan for example. But when showrunner Stephen Moffat planned to introduce a brand new incarnation of the Doctor for the 50th anniversary, he knew that he needed someone remarkable to embody the role. The script for The Name of the Doctor simply ended with the words, "and the most famous actor in the world turns around." John Hurt was always on Moffat's mind for the role, and so it was offered to him outright. Thankfully, with very little time to decide, the legendary actor accepted the part, and within days of finishing a play, he was in Wales ready to get started. Number 18. The episode originally began with a voiceover. The Day of the Doctor begins with that iconic old-school Doctor Who title sequence before transitioning into a scene of Clara teaching a class. Originally though, Moffat's script included a voiceover spoken by the Doctor, or somebody else, he wasn't fully sure, but this was abandoned simply because he didn't like it. Long ago, on the lost world of Gallifrey, the planet of the Time Lords, there was a legend much loved by the children. It told of a great hero who would return on their darkest day to save them all, but first, he would have to save himself. Yeah, it feels a bit too Hollywood, doesn't it? A bit too on the nose. Definitely the right decision to cut it. Number 17. Ten's Tardis was only available for half a day. It would have been extremely disappointing if the 10th Doctor's return didn't also feature an appearance from his Tardis, but the Day of the Doctor kindly delivered on that front. It isn't on screen for very long, and that's because there were some real-world complications that prevented the crew from using it. At the time, Ten's Tardis was part of the Doctor Who experience, which is where they borrowed it from while filming the episode. But because the experience needed it back, the production was only able to utilise it for half a day. To get around this, Moffat scripted in the idea of Tennant's grungy coral TARDIS reverting back to the colder, more machine-like Matt Smith version. Number 16. The initial plan featured the 9th Doctor. While John Hurt's turn as the War Doctor went down a treat, there was some disappointment about the absence of Christopher Eccleston's 9th Doctor. In his initial plans for the anniversary special, Stephen Moffat had intended for 9 to feature. He reached out to Eccleston, who unfortunately decided against reprising the role, and the War Doctor was created in his place. No hard feelings here though, because Eccleston himself has since explained that he loved what Moffat and Hurt did with the character. He said, "I just thought that script was immaculate, and I think it added to the canon of Doctor Who in a way that me coming back wouldn't have done. I think the War Doctor was a brilliant working of Stephen Moffat's imagination, and I loved watching John Hurt do that." Number 15. Some of the Daleks were actual toys. As well as impressive CGI effects, there was another technique used to create the explosive Time War sequences in The Day of the Doctor: miniatures. One way these were utilised was for the moment where the War Doctor's TARDIS crashes through a wall and destroys several Daleks. It was far more practical to smash a smaller TARDIS model through the wall than a full-scale one, but this also meant that smaller Dalek props were needed too, otherwise they'd look like giants and that would be weird. To do this, the team saw several off-the-shelf Dalek toys and simply made a few tweaks to them to make them look more accurate. Et voila! Ready-made small-scale Dalek props. Number 14. Why the 11th Doctor forgets the children. The moment that 10 scolds 11 for forgetting how many children were on Gallifrey the day he destroyed it was chilling.
I moved on.
Where can you be now that you can forget something like that?
Spoilers.
In the on-screen version, 11 justifies this by explaining that he's moved on, but the novelisation explores his forgetfulness a little deeper. It explains how the 9th Doctor spent so long saving life after life to distract himself from counting. One of those lives saved was a therapy robot, which he let loose in the corridors of the TARDIS. The novel suggests that, years later, River and 11 found the robot, and River used its power to erase the Doctor's memory of the children of Gallifrey. Number 13. The story was almost structured a lot differently. Stephen Moffat isn't exactly known for his linear storytelling, and sure enough, The Day of the Doctor bounces between several different timelines, characters, and locations. But the final layout of the episode took a lot of time to get right, with Moffat once considering introducing the 3 main Doctors in a completely different order. An early version of the script started with John Hurt's War Doctor before moving on to David Tennant's 10th Doctor and finally landing on Matt Smith's 11th Doctor. In the end though, Moffat chose to start with 11, mainly because he was the star of the show at the time the episode aired. Number 12. The Doctor's promise wasn't new. Just as all 3 incarnations of the Doctor are preparing to destroy Gallifrey, Clara reminds them of the promise they made when they chose to call themselves the Doctor.
Never cruel or cowardly.
Never give up. Never give in.
While this seems like a very Moffat-y line of dialogue, it actually isn't new. This was Moffat's way of referencing Terence Dick's description of the character in his 1976 book, The Making of Doctor Who. He never gives in and never gives up, however overwhelming the odds against him. The Doctor believes in good and fights evil. Though often caught up in violent situations, he is a man of peace. He is never cruel or cowardly. Perhaps by this point in the writing process, Moff just figured he'd copy from someone else in the class. Number 11. The Origins of Osgood. Petronella Osgood made her debut in The Day of the Doctor. Played by Ingrid Oliver and complete with a Tom Baker scarf, the character was essentially a Doctor Who fangirl who just so happened to work for UNIT. Longtime Whovians might remember the character of Sergeant Osgood in the third Doctor serial The Demons, and the fact that the two characters share a name is no coincidence. Stephen Moffat originally planned for Petronella to be the daughter of Sergeant Osgood, but ultimately decided against explicitly stating this in the episode. Following the popularity of Petronella, Sergeant Osgood has been included more in Titan Comics stories, where he often shares characteristics with his daughter, including using an inhaler. Hopefully though, he's not just a really badly copied Zygon clone. Number 10. Stephen Moffat didn't want to include Rose. Don't worry, we aren't about to expose Stephen Moffat as a Rose Tyler hater. Far from it, in fact. The Day of the Doctor features not only David Tennant reprising his role, but also Billie Piper. However, rather than returning to play Rose, Piper appears as the physical manifestation of the moment. Stephen Moffat explained that he very much wanted to bring Piper along for the ride, but also felt conscious about undoing the end of Rose's story. He said, "I thought the story of Rose, which was beautiful, was done. I didn't want to add to it, I didn't feel qualified to add to it. I didn't want to stick another bit in, it would be wrong." Instead, we were treated to yet another outstanding performance from New Who's first companion. Number 9. Why it's called The Day of the Doctor. Coming up with a title for any Doctor Who episode must be a difficult task, but coming up with a title for the 50th anniversary special? That's a whole other level of pressure. During development, the special was known as The Time War, until the official title was announced on the 11th of September 2013. Moffat explained his choice of title to SFX magazine. He said, "It's very rare in Doctor Who that the story happens to the Doctor. It happens to people around him and he helps out. He's the hero figure who rides in and saves everybody from the story of the week. In this, he is the story of the week. This is the Day of the Doctor." Number 8. Malcolm Taylor returns. Doctor Who fans will surely remember Lee Evans' enigmatic unit scientist Malcolm Taylor. He was absolutely obsessed with the Doctor, and like Osgood, acted how most Whovians would if they came face to face with the Doctor in real life. 2009 Easter special Planet of the Dead was the first and only appearance of Malcolm on our screens. But if you were paying close attention, you might have noticed that he actually made a return of sorts in The Day of the Doctor. Twice during the episode, Kate Stewart makes reference to a Malcolm working at units. Firstly, she remarks that he needs to change the batteries in the Ravens at the Tower of London.
"The Ravens are looking a bit sluggish. Tell Malcolm they need new batteries."
And later, she phones him to send her some old unit files codenamed Chroma, a reference to another multi-Doctor story, The Three Doctors.
"Malcolm, I need you to send me one of my father's incident files. Codenamed Chroma."
References within references. Moff at his moffiest. Number 7. The War Doctor's regeneration was added at the last minute. The episode concludes with the War Doctor effectively shedding the guilt of the Time War and giving himself a new lease of life, quite literally, by regenerating into a brand new form. It's a crucial moment in Doctor Who history that shows us the previously unseen birth of the 9th Doctor, but amazingly, it wasn't always part of Moffat's script. In fact, he only added Hert's regeneration at the last minute, at the same time he was writing The Night of the Doctor. While it was disappointing that we didn't get to see War fully turn into 9, it's always good to see a regeneration scene, and with Murray Gold's fantastic score and director Nick Horan's sweeping aerial camera move, this was a solid one. Number 6. Peter Cushing movie posters were cut due to copyright issues. Doctor Who first made the jump to the big screen in the 1960s when Peter Cushing, most famous for playing Grand Moff Tarkin in Star Wars, played a character called Doctor Who in 2 movies, Doctor Who and the Daleks and Daleks Invasion Earth 2150 AD. These movies aren't official parts of the show's canon, but since The Day of the Doctor was a huge party everyone was invited to, Moffat still wanted to acknowledge them. During the scene where Clara and Kate enter the Black Archive, he initially wanted some Peter Cushing movie posters to be included as background Easter eggs, but unfortunately, copyright issues meant that this wasn't possible. Number 5. Those Dalek gunships aren't drones. With The Day of the Doctor expanding on the Time War, it was inevitable that we were going to see plenty of Daleks in action. Audiences of modern Who had grown used to seeing not only the redesigned bronze Daleks, but also fleets of Dalek spaceships across various episodes. Both of these were showcased during the Time War sequences in the 50th anniversary special, but there were also some new spacecrafts flying about too. At face value, these crafts appear to be drones of some kind, whizzing through the air and firing down on the Gallifreyans below. But if you look closer, you'll notice that these drones are actually being piloted by a group of Daleks. It's a blink and you'll miss it detail, and you know what? Daleks actually look kinda cute when they're this small. Number 4, David Tennant's first scene was his first day on set. David Tennant doesn't appear until 20 minutes into the episode, riding out of the Tardis on horseback, accompanied by good old Queen Bess. Oh, and he's also hunting down a Zygon, because the Doctor doesn't take days off. This scene was also Tennant's first day on set, with the actor donning his iconic costume for the first time in roughly 4 years. Producer Marcus Wilson said it was like watching live archive footage. It must have been both bizarre and brilliant to have Tennant playing the Doctor again. Number 3, one of John Hurt's funniest lines was cut. John Hurt reportedly had a great time filming The Day of the Doctor and was so comfortable in the role that he would occasionally ad-lib during a scene. An example of this occurred when the 3 Doctors are locked up inside the Tower of London. Just as Hurt was thrown into the room with his co-conspirators, he yelled, "You can't lock me up with these two, I'll have my head off now!" However, this line was cut in post-production. Moffat said that they were fools to not include it because Hurt's delivery was apparently hilarious and far better than mine. Number 2, the Brigadier almost had a cameo. Kate Stewart first appeared in the Series 7 episode The Power of 3, where it was revealed that she was the daughter of the Doctor's old friend Brigadier Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart. Nicholas Courtney sadly passed away in 2011, 2 years before the 50th anniversary year, and so the inclusion of Kate seemed like the perfect way to pay homage to the Brigadier's Doctor Who legacy. However, things were nearly very different, and Stephen Moffat was first considering adding some audio clips of the Brigadier to the episode to give him a proper cameo, but in the end this was decided against. Despite his absence in the on-screen version of The Day of the Doctor, the Brigadier was present in the novelisation. There are several passages which explore conversations between him and the curator, and we all know who he was meant to be. Number 1, Matt Smith kept offering the TARDIS controls to David Tennant. Matt Smith is arguably the most adorable human being ever to walk the earth. If you need any proof of that, look no further than this anecdote from the Day of the Doctor's filming. Possibly feeling a little awkward that his co-star was stood around with nothing to do, Smith would frequently offer the TARDIS controls to David Tennant while the two were shooting those interior scenes. According to Moffat, Smith would say, "I mean, it's your TARDIS too," only for Tennant to retort, "Oh no, you're doing fine." And hey, Smith was a very experienced TARDIS pilot by this stage, even if Tennant was being a little sarcastic. Just a friendly bit of banter between Time Lords. Widely regarded as one of the best Doctor Who stories ever, Heaven Sent challenged the traditional formula of the show by giving almost all of its screen time to star Peter Capaldi, who did an amazing job carrying the story on his own, as well as praise being given to the creature design, set design, and to Stephen Moffat's writing. When an episode is as beloved as this one, and when it's so different to everything else in the series, there are always behind-the-scenes stories and fascinating trivia attached to it. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie with Who Culture, here with 20 things you didn't know about Heaven Sent. Number 20. The cycles didn't last as long as you think. It's difficult to gauge how long each version of the Doctor spends in the castle before the cycle resets and he does it all over again. The Doctor says it'll take a day and a half to drag his dying body to the top of the tower, so that's one small indication of the time he spent there. But how long was he there in total? Well, according to Moffat, the answer isn't as crazy as you might think. He said, "In my head, the Doctor is in the castle for several weeks. I assume it varies depending on how the rooms rearrange, but it's probably about 3 weeks. If each cycle takes 3 weeks and the Doctor is in the confession dial for 4.5 billion years overall, that's a frankly insane amount of resets required to break the wall." Number 19. Rachel Talalay's inspiration. Heaven Sent was directed by Rachel Talalay, a Chicago-born filmmaker who also directed Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. But let's not hold that against her, eh? Talalay, who also directed Capaldi's other series finales, plus his overall finale Twice Upon a Time, did a fantastic job creating the suspense needed to pull off an episode like this. But where did she get her inspiration from? Apparently, she went back and watched German expressionist movies from the early 20th century to get visual help from titles like Nosferatu: A Symphony of Horror to The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. It's astonishing the amount of care and effort that went into creating this hour of Saturday night telly. Number 18. Titles in other languages. Though it's got a reputation as being more British than than a bulldog wearing a top hat eating a tea-covered scone, Doctor Who is a global show with a global audience. That means it has to be translated into other languages, which can offer a unique insight into how an episode is perceived. Heaven Sent was called many different things around the world. In France, its title translated to Descent into Heaven. In German, the name came out as The Fear of the Doctor, which is very interesting. Elsewhere, Hungarian viewers got an episode called Second of Eternity, which someone should definitely steal. Number 17. Those are actually Peter Capaldi's skulls. How many times has the Doctor died in a single episode of Doctor Who? Heaven Sent has to hold that record, as the Time Lord spends 4.5 billion years getting repeatedly bumped off by a bloke in a bedsheet. As a result, the castle the Doctor is trapped in is littered with various copies of his own skull. And that statement is actually more true than you might think. That's because Peter Capaldi's own head was used as the model for those skulls. It was taken from a life-size cast made of the actor for the Ghost Doctor in Under the Lake and Before the Flood. Don't ever say Doctor Who doesn't take small details seriously, because that is some serious attention to detail. Number 16. It was too long for BBC America. Even though it didn't have to be translated to be shown in the USA, Heaven Sent did need to undergo some changes for an American audience. BBC America runs commercials as part of its programs, so it usually dedicates an hour to Doctor Who, 45 minutes for the show, 15 minutes or so for adverts. However, Heaven Sent is 54 minutes long, which is way too long for a commercial hour, but instead of cutting scenes, they simply showed it at a slightly faster speed. Fortunately, they then gave it 75 minutes during the following week's rerun. Number 15. Moffat was driven by his dissatisfaction with an earlier plotline. The Amy and Rory storyline received some criticism in its latter half, with some fans feeling that their breakup felt contrived and others unhappy that the show never truly explored the grief they must have felt after losing Melody in A Good Man Goes to War. There you go, folks. Did you really think we could do a video without me mentioning River Song at least once? Moffat was also dissatisfied with how he handled the loss of Melody and its impact on the Ponds, and Heaven Sent actually came from his desire to do that kind of loss and grief aftermath correctly. He said, "Usually big dramatic things happen in Doctor Who, then the next week everyone's absolutely fine. I never found a way to have Amy and Rory grieve over their lost baby, and I still don't know how I would do that. I could never work out how to write that, so I just cut forward several months and rather ducked the issue. So getting that kind of aftermath right in Doctor Who was on my to-do list." Imagine being so determined to correct one of your biggest regrets that you casually write one of the greatest Doctor Who episodes ever. What a guy. Number 14. The Veil was trying to be nice. The Blogs of Doom were a series of short stories published in Doctor Who magazine by prolific Who fiction writer Jonathan Morris. They offered up some ideas about some of the show's minor characters, including the Veil. According to Morris, the hooded harbinger of doom might not have been so bad after all. In his story, the Veil is just trying to do its job. It doesn't want to hurt the Doctor, in fact it wants to help him. It makes numerous attempts to point out a spade the Doctor could use to knock down the Diamond Wall, but to no avail. Should we consider this canon? Well, that's up to you, but it's really fascinating either way. Number 13. The unusual spoon mistake. What is it with the 12th Doctor and spoons? He used one to fight Robin Hood, and now there's this. The man's obsessed. When the Doctor is eating some soup, he gets distracted and drops the spoon in the bowl. The close-up of this happening is meant to be for dramatic effect, but it accidentally reveals a mistake so strange that it got a whole Radio Times article to itself. When the spoon has fallen, you can see a second one just behind it, complete with another person's arm holding it up. What was the purpose of the second arm and the second spoon? Was this spoon to perform the drip while Capaldi dropped the main one, or was it the confession dial playing tricks on our hero? It's spooky. Number 12. It took up a quarter of the Series 9 soundtrack. The Series 9 soundtrack is the perfect gift for anyone, even if they don't watch Doctor Who. Seriously, just give it to them. It's a 4-disc set that showcases some of composer Murray Gold's best work from across 2015, and one of those discs is devoted entirely to the music of Heaven Sent. Some episodes from the series are lucky to have one song featured in the collection, but Heaven Sent got over 40 minutes dedicated to it. It's an episode that relies heavily on its atmosphere, and a large part of that is the music, so it's no surprise that there was so much material. I'm just glad we got all of it. Number 11. The Veil was played by a familiar face. Apart from a brief appearance by Jenna Coleman as Clara, the only actors in Heaven Sent are Peter Capaldi and Jamie Reed Quarrell. Reed Quarrell plays the Veil and does a great job bringing the silent menace to life, but this wasn't the first time Doctor Who audiences had seen his work. In fact, he appeared earlier in this same series playing Colony Sarf, an agent of Davros who was made up of snakes Daleks in The Magician's Apprentice and The Witch's Familiar. Playing two memorable villains in one series? That's gotta be some sort of record. Number 10, IMDb loves it. Ah, the Internet Movie Database. Where would we be without you? As well as showcasing trailers, cast lists, and nerdy trivia, IMDb also hands out ratings to films and TV shows. It's done this for Doctor Who, and Heaven Sent comes out very well indeed. Of all the episodes since the 2005 revival, Heaven Sent currently ranks number 2 with a score of 9.6. That means it beat out both parts of the library story, but came up short against Blink, which tops the list with a 9.8 out of 10. Wait a second, does that mean Moffat has the entire top 4 to himself? That's not good for his ego. Number 9, its unique opening credits. The Doctor Who opening credits are just as famous as anything else from the show. The names of the actors playing the Doctor and the companions flash up on screen while the TARDIS travels through some variation of the time vortex. Iconic stuff. But what about when there's no companion? Heaven Sent is the first New Who episode to only feature one actor's name in the opening sequence. Even though Jenna Coleman does make an appearance, Peter Capaldi does the heavy lifting and therefore gets to hog the spotlight. It makes you wonder why Catherine Tate was credited in the opening sequence for Midnight, despite only bookending the episode with 2 short scenes. Wouldn't it be interesting to be a fly on the wall for some of these conversations between the showrunners? Number 8, many shots were filmed many times. Rachel Talalay did a damn fine job on this episode, especially considering how much stress she was under. The director had to get this incredibly tricky episode spot on, all the while having Moffat in her ear telling her to do things she'd already done. Talalay was instructed to record the same shots multiple times, but slightly differently. This was so they could be used in scenes showing later iterations of the Doctor's journey to Room 12. Why did they have to be different? Well, because each trip around the castle was different. This made each of the rapid-fire cycles at the end of the episode feel slightly distinct, as they probably would be. Number 7, it broke a bizarre Moffat record. Series 9 was Stephen Moffat's 5th series as Doctor Who showrunner, and it ended up breaking a record when it came to his writing. Up to this point, the penultimate episode of every Moffat series had featured the Cybermen. They were part of the Alliance in the Pandorica Opens, and one of them terrorised Amy Pond earlier in the episode. They annoyed James Corden in closing time, they chased the Doctor around a theme park in Nightmare in Silver, and were at the command of Missy in Dark Water. As for Heaven Sent, not a single murderous cyborg to be found. The penultimate episode from the next series, Series 10's World Enough and Time, does have the Cybermen in it, so Heaven Sent really does stand alone. Number 6, it might not have happened. Can you imagine a world where Heaven Sent didn't exist? Series 9 would be remembered a lot differently, that's for sure. Clara Oswald was originally meant to die in the series finale, which is in keeping with how Doctor Who has done companion departures in the past. However, Moffat decided that her death would be more impactful if it happened earlier, and so brought it forward to episode 10, which became Face the Raven. As the events of Heaven Sent follow on from Clara's demise, the episode might not have happened if she'd been offed in the series finale, because, well, that would be the final episode of the series. Alternatively, Moffat could have written it as a festive special, which would have made Christmas Day 2015 a very depressing affair indeed. Number 5, it could have been a Big Finish story. God bless Big Finish Productions. This company has been making excellent Doctor Who audio dramas since 1999, helping to fill in the gaps and provide a time-travelling fix when the show is off the air. Though there's no visual element, Big Finish stories can be just as compelling as those that play out on TV. And in an alternate reality, we would have got an audio-only version of Heaven Sent. Moffat originally dreamt up the idea of the transmat, the thing that makes clones of the Doctor, for a Big Finish story he was considering submitting in the late 90s. But of course this never happened, and he held onto the idea until 2015 instead. Number 4, the castle had been seen before. Because constantly changing castles don't exist in the real world, the Doctor Who team had to use regular old castles to film Heaven Sent in. The two they chose, Caerphilly Castle and Cardiff Castle, had both appeared in Doctor Who before. Caerphilly Castle was used as certain parts of the acid factory in The Rebel Flesh and the Almost People, and also for some of the underground tunnel scenes in The Vampires of Venice. Cardiff Castle was also used in The Rebel Flesh and was also seen in the Torchwood episode Exit Wounds. Has any other show done more for Welsh tourism than Doctor Who? I don't think so. Number 3, the monster was supposed to be different. During a watch-along of Heaven Sent in 2020, Moffat revealed something very interesting about the Veil. It very nearly never existed. Originally, the plan was to use another of his creations as the Doctor's pursuer in Heaven Sent, a weeping angel. Moffat tweeted out that this was the initial plan for the episode and that he'd forgotten forgotten that this was what he was going to do. While the Angels are cracking villains, it was definitely the right choice to go with something new here. Wouldn't it have been very easy for the Angels to catch the Doctor considering how fast they move? The Veil was fresh, mysterious and creepy, and was the perfect monster for this story. Number 2. What happened on the first few cycles? When we first see the Doctor stuck inside the confession dial, he's already been there for a long time. So what was he up to when the cameras weren't rolling? What happened on the very first cycle, and who left the clues leading the Doctor to room 12? Stephen Moffat has the answers. In Doctor Who magazine's production notes, Moffat said that the Doctor was ancient by the time he'd first worked out how to escape the castle. That means he was a very, very old man when he first started punching the wall. Furthermore, another ancient version of the Doctor never punched the wall at all. This Doctor, realizing that future versions of himself would need to find room 12 much quicker, scratched "I am in 12" in as many places as he could and hoped that some of these messages survived the castle's reset. This version of the Doctor also wrote "I am 12" on the back of Clara's portrait, and this too survived the reset. But in Moffat's own words, the Doctor draws too much strength from her smile ever to turn her face to the wall. Just when you thought this episode couldn't get any sadder. Oh. Number 1. Moffat knew the cliffhanger well in advance. Some of Stephen Moffat's story arcs felt made up on the fly, but the man had impeccable planning skills when it came to Heaven Sent. In an interview with Doctor Who magazine in June 2014, the writer hinted at a whopper of a cliffhanger coming up. That cliffhanger would eventually be Heaven Sent, which was broadcast almost 18 months after this interview, where the Doctor returns to Gallifrey. In other words, Moffat had figured out how Heaven Sent was going to end while he was still working on Series 8. That's how far in advance this man's mind works. Very impressive. On the 15th of November 2009, millions of people settled in for a special episode of Doctor Who. David Tennant's 10th Doctor would travel to a human colony on Mars, where he would meet Captain Adelaide Brooke and her crew. Unfortunately, they were not alone on the Red Planet, as a deadly parasite living in the water was about to make itself known. This was the waters of Mars. As a seminal outing for the 10th Doctor, it's always a fun one to look back on. So, let's do just that. I'm Ellie with Who Culture here with 20 things you didn't know about the waters of Mars. Number 20. It was almost set in a hotel. Remember the Series 6 episode The God Complex? The one set in the hotel with the Minotaur and David Walliams? Well, this is almost what the waters of Mars ended up looking like. Sort of. Russell T Davies' original plan for the episode was to revive an idea he'd had where the Doctor would travel to a strange hotel that had somehow caused Earth to be frozen in time. Unfortunately, RTD soon realised that his vision of the Doctor exploring an abandoned London would cost a lot of money and would be very complicated to pull off. So the hotel idea was shelved, and Stephen Moffat and Toby Whithouse developed a totally different hotel idea a few years later. Number 19. Andy was the android. Plenty of actors have played more than one character in Doctor Who, but few have a resume quite as varied as Alan Roscoe. Roscoe, who also appeared in the Star Wars franchise, plays Andy Stone in The Waters of Mars, one of the Bowie base crew members who succumbs to the flood early on. This was the first time Who audiences had seen his face, as he'd previously appeared in a number of costumed roles, including a Slitheen, an Auton, and the best of the bunch, the question-asking, laser-firing android in Bad Wolf and the Parting of the Ways. This guy took down a couple of Daleks, but couldn't fight off some water? Weak effort. Number 18. Long-awaited November return. Doctor Who didn't have a regular series in 2009, instead releasing a handful of specials throughout the year. There were 2 Christmas specials at either end, an Easter special, a New Year's Day episode in 2010, and The Waters of Mars. This adventure dropped at 7 PM on Sunday the 15th of November 2009, making it the first episode since the show's 2005 revival to air in that month. The previous episode to air in November was the second part of Survival, the serial that closed out Doctor Who's classic run in 1989. November is, of course, a very significant month for Doctor Who, as the very first episode was shown on the 23rd of November 1963. Now, can the 60th anniversary specials please hurry up? Number 17. It was originally a Christmas special. Instead of airing on a random date in November, The Waters of Mars was originally going to debut on the 19th of December 2009, with The End of Time Parts 1 and 2 Who set for Christmas Day and New Year's Day. That's right, the original plan was 3 Doctor Who episodes over the festive period. What a gift that would have been. Unfortunately, as you'll find out a bit later on, the production of The Waters of Mars was all over the place, and so its air date got brought forward to November. This presented somewhat of a problem for Russell T Davies and co-writer Phil Ford, who had envisioned it as a Christmas-themed episode, with initial outlines of the story titled Red Christmas and Christmas on Mars. Ultimately, all Christmas references were removed from the script, and any hopes of seeing zero-gravity Brussels sprouts were scuppered. Number 16. The surface of Mars was seen in other episodes. As shocking as it may seem, this episode was not actually filmed on location on Mars. Instead, the Red Planet was created here on Earth at a place called Taff's Well in Wales, which unsurprisingly is a quarry. The Doctor Who team was clearly happy with this location, as this wasn't the only time they used it. Scenes in The End of Time were filmed there when it doubled up as the snowy surface of the Ood sphere. It would appear again under Matt Smith's Doctor as the rocky junk shop setting in The Doctor's Wife. Torchwood also got in on the action with several scenes in Children of Earth Day 2, including a scantily clad Captain Jack Harkness also appeared in this rocky area. Number 15. It was dedicated to Barry Letts. Just over a month before The Waters of Mars aired, the great Barry Letts passed away at the age of 84. Letts had served as the producer for Doctor Who during the entirety of Jon Pertwee's tenure as the 3rd Doctor, and was also involved in the casting of Tom Baker as the 4th Doctor. In making this decision, Letts would help create some of the most beloved moments in the show's history. Considering how much New Who owed to Letts, it makes perfect sense that The Waters of Mars includes a dedication to him just before the credits. A classy touch in honour of someone who was described by The Guardian as a pioneer of British television. Number 14. There were loads of financial issues. The Waters of Mars was conceived in 2008, and what else happened around this time? The world's economy fell apart. The impact of the global financial crash resulted in a shortage of funds for Doctor Who, and it was initially thought that The End of Time would have to be shortened to 2 45-minute episodes instead of the proposed hour-long ones. The other option that was floated about was to abandon The Waters of Mars entirely, as it was deemed the least important of the remaining specials. Thankfully, executive producer Julie Gardner was soon able to secure funding, but the show's money problems were not over yet. The BBC made a mistake which led to some of the budget for Planet of the Dead going missing, so money was moved over from the Waters of Mars budget to compensate. This resulted in huge CGI water creatures being scrapped, and the villain instead became the viral infection known as the Flood. Considering how fantastic a villain the Flood is, I for one think that this whole ordeal definitely worked out for the best. Number 13. The Gusev Crater is real. There's so much sci-fi jargon in Doctor Who that when the show does include stuff that actually exists, it can be easily missed. One such example is the Gusev Crater, the location of Bowie Base 1 in The Waters of Mars. While that sounds like a word that could easily have been made up by one of the writers, it's actually a real feature of our red galactic neighbour. It was named after a Russian astronomer in 1976 and is approximately 90 miles wide, and was supposedly formed 3 to 4 billion years ago. Hopefully it's not actually harbouring a deadly soggy virus though. Number 12. Adelaide was nearly Russian. One of the best parts of The Waters of Mars is Captain Adelaide Brooke, played superbly by Lindsay Duncan. Firm but never unlikable, Brooke plays a pivotal role as the Bowie Base commander destined to die in order for her ancestors to go on to greatness. That is, until a certain Time Lord Victorious sticks his beak in. As the writers wanted Bowie Base 1 to feel multinational, Adelaide's character was almost a Russian cosmonaut named Valentina Kerensky. When Brooke became British, her initial name was Grace, until RTD pointed out that Grace was the name of the 8th Doctor's companion in the TV movie. She was soon renamed Adelaide, and her original Russian surname lived on in the form of actual Russian character Yuri Kerensky. Number 11. It was Graham Harper's final episode. Doctor Who has had plenty of legendary directors over the years, but there have been few on the level of Graham Harper. Harper first worked on Doctor Who as a production assistant in the 1970s. He directed his first serial, the beloved 5th Doctor regeneration story The Caves of Androzani in 1984, and would work off and on with the classic series until it shut its doors in 1989. When it made a triumphant return, Harper was brought in to direct even more episodes, starting with Series 2's Rise of the Cybermen and the Age of Steel. He then helmed episodes like Utopia, Turn Left, and The Stolen Earth and Journey's End. I mean, what a filmography! Harper's final episode was The Waters of Mars, before he walked away as the only man to direct episodes of both classic and modern Doctor Who. Number 10. Several romantic subplots were cut. Ever ever wondered why Adelaide and her second-in-command Ed seem so frosty towards each other? Well, it's because they were supposed to be much closer than their ranks suggested. RTD has said that he originally intended for there to be more overtly romantic tones to Adelaide and Ed's relationship, but they were eventually cut. He changed Ed's last words to "you never could forgive me" to hint at this, while also leaving things up in the air. While the romantic feelings between Yuri and Mia were more prominent in the final cut, there were also more overt links between those two that were, you guessed it, cut for time. Number 9. Maggie was based on Helen Charman. Played by Sharon Duncan Brewster, Maggie Kane is one of the most important characters in the story, acting as a sort of spokesperson / de facto leader for the Flood. Her magnitude with regards to the plot might be why she was partly based on such an important figure in British space travel, astronaut Helen Charman. In 1991, Charman became the first British person to go to space as part of a privately funded mission to the Russian space station Mir. The Doctor's flashback to Maggie's obituary shows that she was born in Grenoside, Sheffield, and later studied chemistry at the University of Sheffield, two things that are also true about Charman. Number 8. Lindsay Duncan set a companion record. Circling back to Lindsay Duncan now, who made a nice bit of history when she took on the role of companion for this episode. The writers wanted the Doctor's sidekick in this episode to be an older woman, instead of the much younger women that he'd been with in the previous outings. Duncan, who was 59 when this episode aired, became the oldest person to ever play the Doctor's companion, for about a month. Bernard Cribbins, who was 80 at the time, snatched the record from her when he teamed up with 10 in the very next special. Duncan would have probably been fuming, had it been anyone else but cuddly old Wilf, that is. Number 7. Mia and Yuri had a daughter. Both Mia and Yuri were spared their original fates when the Doctor broke his own interference rules and rescued them from their exploding base. The last shot of them on TV is Yuri running after Mia as the gravity of the situation gets too much for her, but that isn't where their story ended. As revealed in the 2023 novelization of the story, which includes far more references to the couple's on-base romance, it's revealed that Yuri and Mia stayed together after their rescue and even had a child. They used this as an opportunity to honour their fallen comrade, naming their firstborn daughter Adelaide. Number 6. The Ice Warrior's absence. Upon watching The Waters of Mars, fans of classic Who might have wondered, where are the Ice Warriors? These chilling foes from way back in the day were also inhabitants of the Red Planet. They get a name drop during the episode, but why did they not have more to do on their home world? As it turns out, this question was answered in a deleted scene. While pondering the Flood, the Doctor theorizes that, although the Ice Warriors were able to imprison it inside a glacier, they were not fully able to defeat it. This led to them fleeing Mars, leaving their menacing enemy behind for some other unfortunate souls to come across. Number 5. American audiences loved it. Doctor Who truly exploded overseas when Matt Smith took the reins, but still, Whovians across the pond couldn't get enough of David Tennant trying not to get wet, as the Waters of Mars premiere gave BBC America its biggest primetime viewing figures ever, with 1.1 million people tuning in. Granted, this was a fraction of what the episode did in the UK, but you have to take these small victories where you can, right? Number 4. Wally-inspired gadget. Gadget, the remote-controlled robot the Doctor uses to save the day, might not have existed had another lovable machine not come along 1 year earlier. RTD was inspired to include an affable robot in this story after the success of Pixar's Wall-E, which released to massive praise in 2008. Gadget shares more than a few physical characteristics with his trash-compacting counterpart, right down to the tracks it uses to get around. In one early draft of the story, Gadget was meant to go berserk and attack the Doctor, but this was dropped in favour of the tin can coming to his aid instead. Gadget, gadget. Number 3. The Cloister Bell returns. The Waters of Mars takes quite a dark turn at the end, after Adelaide Brooke kills herself in order to keep her timeline intact. This essentially spells the end for the 10th Doctor, as his flagrant abuse of time travel law curses him to meet his maker. His impending doom is heralded by the arrival of Ood Sigma, and a sound that must have sent chills down the Time Lord's spine. And everyone's spine, come to think of it. That sound is the Cloister Bell, essentially a warning system inside the Tardis. Though the bell had been used in New Who before, it can be heard in The Sound of Drums and Turn Left, for example, this was the first time since 1981's Logopolis that it had been used to signal the Doctor's death. Number 2, Helen Mirin almost played Adelaide. Yep, you heard me right. The role of Adelaide Brooke was originally considered for Academy Award-winning actress and all-round badass, Dame Helen Mirin. Can you imagine? Before the episode even had its proper name, RTD wanted Mirin to play the older woman who was teamed up with the Doctor. This is why Adelaide wasn't Russian, as RTD worried that this was too similar to Mirin's Soviet character in the film 2010, The Year We Make Contact. In the end, the stars didn't align and Mirin didn't appear in the episode. But the waters of Mars would undoubtedly be remembered very differently today had the team managed to pull off this casting coup. But nevertheless, Lindsay Duncan did a terrific job playing Adelaide Brooke, and don't for one moment think that we're suggesting otherwise. Number 1, a real scientific discovery inspired the plot. There were 2 storylines in the running for this episode during its early days. RTD's Mars-based plot and the aforementioned hotel idea, which was written by Phil Ford. RTD eventually picked his idea partially due to a timely announcement made by NASA. Shortly before the 2 writers were set to meet to discuss the episode, it was revealed that NASA's Phoenix Mars lander had discovered frozen water on the surface of the red planet. RTD took this as a sign to push ahead with his idea and came up with the concept of a water-based monster for the Doctor to fight. Also inspiring the soggy nature of the story's villain was the animated water in James Cameron's seminal 1989 sci-fi flick The Abyss. Good thing the Phoenix didn't discover jelly on Mars instead.
The thing that people tend to forget about Doctor Who is its absolute ability to give pain. Just pain. With some slight trepidation, I'm Sean Ferrick for Who Culture, and here are 20 things you didn't know about the Angels Take Manhattan. Number 20. The Ponds wanted a permanent goodbye. Aside from that Statue of Liberty reveal, the Angels Take Manhattan is most famous for being the last regular appearance of Amy and Rory Pond. The 11th Doctor's first friends were snatched from the jaws of safety by a rogue angel and cast backwards in time forevermore, writing them out of the show in a tragic and permanent fashion, which is exactly what the actors wanted. Karen Gillan and Arthur Darvill requested that Amy and Rory be removed for good, as they didn't want their demise to be undercut by recurring cameos like certain other companions. Rose. Gillan did go back on her word when she appeared briefly at the end of Matt Smith's final episode, but that cameo was both incredibly short and entirely fitting considering Amy's connection to the Raggedy Man. Darvill, meanwhile, hasn't been seen in an episode of Doctor Who since departing. Number 19. It was originally the Daleks. It's difficult to imagine it being any other way, but the Weeping Angels were not the original villains of this story. Initially it was going to be the Daleks. Writer and showrunner Stephen Moffat felt that such a devastating blow to the Doctor should be dealt by his oldest enemies, adding more heat to their eons-long feud. However, he was cautious about returning the Daleks to New York, as this had already been done, relatively recently, in Daleks in Manhattan: Evolution of the Daleks. Feeling that the Angels were a better fit for this somber noir setting, they were drafted in instead, and the Sons of Skaro were moved to the series premiere, Asylum of the Daleks. The Daleks would probably have made for a much more predictable ending for the Ponds, so we're glad it wasn't them. Number 18. Middle name mayhem. Whovians must have been delighted when they finally learned Rory's middle name in The Angels Take Manhattan, were it not for the small fact that he had to die for them to do so. On Rory's tombstone at the end of the episode, the text reads, "In loving memory, Rory Arthur Williams, aged 82. It took us until his final episode to learn that his middle name is Arthur. Poor Rory. But of course, this is the same as actor Arthur Darvill's first name. But it could also be a nod to Mark Williams, who played Rory's dad, Brian, in his role of Arthur Weasley in the Harry Potter movies. Meanwhile, Amy's inscription gets zero mention of a middle name, despite the fact that it was revealed to be Jessica way back in her second episode, The Beast Below. Why no middle name for Amy? Who knows? Damn gravestone double standards. Number 17. To kill or not to kill. Booting off a companion can't be an easy job for any showrunner, even if Russell T Davies did it basically any chance he got. When the time came for Moffat to say goodbye to Amy and Rory, the weight of this decision really affected him. He told Radio Times in 2012 that he went back and forth several times over the couple's fate. How and why would they leave, and would they live or die? I wrote and rewrote, I had a completely different ending and threw it away. So many times over those mad few days, the fate of the Ponds changed. Alive, dead, nothing felt right, nothing felt inevitable. In the end, he went for a halfway house. The couple were dead in the timeline of the show, but got to live out full lives in the past. It makes you wonder what the ending he threw away was like. Can't have been any sadder, surely. Number 16. Grail's grim alternate fate. When Amy and the Doctor first find River and Rory in the past, they've been captured by Julius Grail, an avid collector of artifacts. While his fate was left ambiguous in the final cut, there were initially plans to show what happened to him, and they weren't very nice. One early draft had him banished back to a workshop where he was forced to make the very the items he had spent his life collecting. A second idea was to show him being sent to the past and then have him turn up in one of his own paintings. This painting would have revealed that the angels had sent him back to the Renaissance where he was enslaved. The second idea was filmed, but was dropped during editing. Number 15. The Jump was filmed first. It's no secret that TV shows and movies aren't usually filmed in story order. Sometimes moments towards the end are among the first things captured. This is precisely what happened with The Angels Take Manhattan. The Ponds think that they've saved themselves when they jumped off Winter Quay, killing Rory twice in one night and creating a paradox that defeats the Angels. The Jump was filmed on the 23rd of March 2012, the very first day of recording for The Angels Take Manhattan. Meanwhile, the climactic graveyard sequence was filmed a few weeks later on the 19th of April 2012, making that a very sad day in Doctor Who history indeed. Number 14. Cherub inspiration. The Angels Take Manhattan introduced infant versions of the Stone Assassins. Oh, how cute. Until they send you back to the Middle Ages. This type of angel didn't exist until director Nick Hurren went on a location scouting trip to New York. Hurren took pictures of various landmarks in the city, including the Bethesda Fountain in Central Park, which has a huge angel statue as its centerpiece and is surrounded by smaller cherub statues. When studying this photograph back in the UK, Moffat came up with the idea of a cherub variant of the Weeping Angels, as he felt their childlike design made them incredibly creepy. And you know what? He was bang on the money for that one. Number 13. Karen Gillan read the afterword. The Angels Take Manhattan is bookended by the Doctor reading a novel written by River Song, which details the events of the episode before and after they happen. At the end, the Doctor reads the last page of the book, which turns out to be a special message written by Amy to let him know that she and Rory lived a good life and still loved him always and forever. It's a heavy scene, one of the last bits of communication between the girl who waited and her Raggedy Man. So Gillan felt it was important that they did as much possible to get it right. This resulted in Gillan sitting just off screen, reading the letter aloud to Smith to get as much emotion as possible out of his performance. Amy and the Doctor, friends till the very end. Number 12. The letter scene's crazy filming conditions. Speaking of this scene, it was way more complicated to film than you'd think it would be. For this tearful farewell, Smith was afforded not 3 takes, not 2, but one take. This is because it was shot on location in Central Park, where hundreds of people had gathered to watch it being filmed. Imagine the stress the crew must have felt. It can't have been easy. Smith was given a different page of the book to hold in case somebody photographed the real one, and Gillan was forced to read her lines incredibly quietly in case she was recorded. Despite all this pressure, Smith pulled it off, which is a testament to just how bloomin' good of an actor the man really is. Number 11. It was almost wibbly-wobblier. The Angels' first episode, Blink, gave the world one of the ultimate Doctor Who memes in the form of Ten's legendary wibbly-wobbly timey-wimey speech. So it makes sense that such mind-bending concepts nearly made a return in one of the Angels' most prominent appearances. Plans for The Angels Take Manhattan originally featured a much more complex depiction of their time manipulation powers. Audiences would have seen even more versions of Rory running about the Winter Quay, as well as different incarnations of Sam Garner, the detective from the cold open. Additionally, the girl Garner sees in the window was to have been staring at an older, future version of herself. Eventually, it was decided to simplify things a bit, but this was probably for the best. Number 10. An important last-minute addition. The final recording for The Angels Take Manhattan was supposed to be a few pickup shots on the 30th of April 2012, but at the last minute, an extra day of filming was penciled in for the 28th of June. It was decided that the Doctor needed to say why he couldn't take the Tardis back to 1938 New York, so lines were written explaining how the timelines were all scrambled. This pickup was filmed at Box Cemetery in Llanelli, Wales, where the rest of the graveyard scene was shot. It was directed by Dinosaurs on a Spaceship and A Town Called Mercy's Saul Metzstein, as The Angels Take Manhattan director Nick Hurren was unavailable. It's a good job these lines were added, otherwise fans would have been even more confused why the Doctor couldn't go back and rescue the Ponds all over again. Number 9. Pond River Publishing. Spoiler alert, but everybody knows that River Song's real name is Melody Pond, and there's a subtle reference to both these monikers in The Angels Takes Manhattan. The book that starts this whole mess, Melody Malone, Private Detective in Old New York Town, is written by River and published by Amy. As a result, the name of the publishing company is Pond River Publishing, a neat little nod to both mother and daughter. This detail isn't visible in the episode, but it was confirmed by some production artwork. The actual text in alongside the book was taken from a real novel called The Thin Man by Dashiell Hammett. Hammett was a famous detective writer in the 20s and 30s and was responsible for penning The Maltese Falcon, the film version of which heavily inspired The Angels Take Manhattan's tone and setting. Number 8. A Story of Lasts. Amy and Rory weren't the only ones saying goodbye in this episode. It was also the final appearance of the title sequence that had been used from the 11th Doctor's first outing, with the next episode, the 2012 Christmas special, The Snowmen, introducing a redesign. The Angels Take Manhattan is also the last time we saw Eleven's tweed jacket and his first Tardis console room, both of which were also replaced in The Snowmen. The loss of the Ponds truly was the end of an era. Number 7. The epilogue that almost never was. In The Power of Three, Rory's dad Brian makes the Doctor promise that he'll bring his son and daughter-in-law back safely. The Time Lord agrees, only to betray that trust one adventure later. Poor Brian had his entire world turned upside down with seemingly no explanation. That is until you watch P.S. Premiering online shortly after The Angels Take Manhattan's broadcast, P.S. is a short animated scene of Brian receiving a letter from Amy and Rory delivered by their adopted son. This sequence, which was written by Chris Chibnall, was supposed to be filmed in live action, but Brian's actor, Mark Williams, was unavailable for the shoot. Rather than scrapping it entirely, the storybirds were animated and Arthur Darvill was brought in to narrate, resulting in a heartfelt epilogue to the Pond's journey. Number 6. It's fans' favourite episode of Series 7. Series 7 was a strange time for Doctor Who, as it was split into two distinctive parts, one with the Ponds and one without. There were some great episodes either side of the divide, but the one that Whovians thought was the best of the bunch was, you guessed it, The Angels Take Manhattan. On IMDb, the episode is the joint highest ranked along with The Name of the Doctor, both of which scored 9 out of 10. Though if you count the specials as part of the series, The Day of the Doctor tops them both with 9.3 out of 10. Other contenders for the top spot were Asylum of the Daleks at 8.5, The Bells of St. John at 7.8, and Hyde at 7.6. Number 5. Brightwell and Hyman. No, Brightwell and Hyman is not a firm of lawyers or estate agents, but rather the name of a company that makes matches. Rory uses a box of Brightwell and Hyman matches to fend off the cherub statues, but what you almost certainly didn't know is that this brand would appear in Doctor Who again. A few episodes later, in The Crimson Horror, a poster can be seen in the background of a shot advertising Brightwell and Hyman quality matches. This makes sense, seeing as how the setting of Sweetville centres around a giant match factory. Brightwell and Hyman is never once spoken on screen, making this quite possibly one of the most obscure connections in the show. Number 4. Why the Doctor can't visit the Ponds. One of the biggest bugbears fans have with The Angels Take Manhattan is that, in theory, the Doctor could just hop in the TARDIS, choose a random city in the past and tell the Ponds to meet him there. But unfortunately for a Fez-loving hero, he's played fast and loose with the rules of time, and Amy and Rory's history was too wibbly-wobbly to interfere with. At least that's the explanation offered by Stephen Moffat, who said he can't interfere. In normal circumstances, he might have gone back and said, look, we'll just put a headstone up and you'll write the book. But there is so much scar tissue, and the number of paradoxes that have already been inflicted on that nexus of timelines that will rip apart if you try and do one more thing. He has to leave it alone. Considering how often Doctor interferes with those timelines and fixed points, it's an explanation that's unlikely to satisfy many fans. But over a decade later, it's the only explanation we're ever going to get. Number 3. It has a sequel. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Whovians around the world came together to watch old episodes of the show. To coincide with the screening of The Doctor's Wife, a short film was produced called Rory's Story. Written by Neil Gaiman, it featured Mr. Pond talking to his soon-to-be adopted son Anthony from 1946. He's filming himself on a smartphone he'd carried from the future. Just don't worry about how he might have charged it, okay? Rory recounts several of his and Amy's adventures, including how they ended up in the past, before his wife calls for him to come help paint the baby's room. It was lovely to check in on the Ponds after so many years away, especially during those gloomy pandemic times. Number 2. Yowza. The Doctor has said and done many unfashionable things over the years, but uttering the word yowza, that ranks up there with the cringiest. Eleven says it while reading Melody Malone, prompting Amy to call out his choice of words. She shouldn't have been too surprised though, as he'd actually said it before. In The Almost People, when looking for an escape route, the Doctor exclaims yowza when he finds one, much to Amy's confusion. Then, in The Name of the Doctor, he says it again after avoiding the Great Intelligence's minions, the Whispermen. They've never said it since though. Probably realised how uncool it was. Number 1. Amy's ending was years in the making. In December 2011, it was announced that Karen Gillan and Arthur Darvill were exiting Doctor Who, nearly an entire year before it actually happened. Moffat tried to throw viewers off the scent by introducing new companion Jenna Coleman early, but we all knew the inevitable was coming. Interestingly enough, Amy's swan song had actually been foretold much earlier, and by much earlier, we mean her very first episode. When a young Amelia is waiting for the Doctor to return in the 11th hour, there's a shot shot of her looking up at the sky as she hears the sound of the Tardis. This seems a bit random at the time, as it was established that the Doctor never came back for her. And in fact, that was an important part of Amy's character. She was the girl who waited, after all. In The Angels Take Manhattan, however, we learn that the Doctor did eventually go back for her, but only after Amy asks him to in her final letter. This is something Moffat had been planning to reveal from day one, as he revealed to the press before The Angels Take Manhattan debuted. After showing Amelia Pond in the garden as a young girl in the 11th hour, the final shot in The Angels Take Manhattan is a punchline I've been waiting to tell for 2.5 years. One of the great things about the 11th Doctor's era is that it's one giant story arc from the first episode to the last. This payoff in particular was incredibly emotional for fans who'd stuck with Amy's journey from that very first shot of her lonely old house.
With David Tennant's final Doctor Who story hitting our screens, let's journey back to his other final Doctor Who story. The End of Time has some of the craziest and most heartfelt moments in Doctor Who. It's a story that really felt like the end of an era, and there's never been a better time for a deep dive. So let's get cracking. I'm Ellie for Who Culture, here with 20 things you didn't know about The End of Time. Number 20, the regeneration that never was. The End of Time was the swan song for the much-loved 10th Doctor. After saving good old Wilf from a radiation booth, Ten embarks on a goodbye tour for the ages, before regenerating into Matt Smith's 11th Doctor in a blaze of glory. However, it could have been very different. Russell T Davies originally wanted Ten's goodbye to be a subtle affair, where the Doctor would die rescuing a seemingly unremarkable alien family. He liked the idea that the great Time Lord was so noble that he would sacrifice himself to save a group of ordinary people. This was changed for 2 reasons. Davis was worried that such a simple story wouldn't play well over 2 hours, and that audiences would be disappointed to see a beloved character go out in such low-stakes circumstances. And he was probably right. Number 19, Heath Ledger inspired John Sim. After a beautifully unhinged performance as the Doctor's nemesis in Series 3, John Sim turned the crazy dial up to 11 for his second stint as the Master. Zapping people with force lightning and chowing down on some burgers/turkey/homeless people, Sim's manic energy fit the character perfectly, and perhaps one of the reasons it was so good was that he took cues from a Hollywood heavyweight. Sim was inspired by elements of Heath Ledger's Joker from The Dark Knight, which had come out the year before. It was also his idea to dye his hair blonde to indicate something had gone wrong with his resurrection. Now imagine if it had been the other way round and Ledger had requested a scene where the Joker danced to Voodoo Child. I'd watch that. Number 18, RTD and Matt Smith's awkward first meeting. With one Doctor out of the way, a new one was needed to take his place. Enter adorable man-boy Matt Smith, whose first scene as the 11th Doctor was in The End of Time Part 2. This means that Smith actually spent some time with Russell T Davies during the shoot, which is kinda weird to think about, isn't it? Since Smith is so intrinsically tied to Stephen Moffat. As the new Doctor arrived to film his first scene, everyone had been cleared out of the Tardis set to ease the pressure on him. Unfortunately, this meant that everyone was now stood outside, and Smith had to wade through them all to get to set. Among them was RTD, who wanted to stay out of Smith's way and let him get on with it. However, Smith spotted Davis right as he was turning around to avoid him. Ooh, awkward. Number 17, the Doctor almost met Trinity Wells. Oh, good old Trinity Wells. Do you know what, at this point I feel like Who Culture is basically just a Trinity Wells fan account. One of the most consistent parts of RTD's first stint as showrunner was a familiar American newsreader who cropped up whenever there was a big incident to report on. Trinity Wells appeared in several 9th and 10th Doctor stories, covering events like the spaceship in the Thames, the Sycorax invasion, and the Atmos crisis. She was the calming voice of reason within the madness, and she was almost a lot more than just a face on a screen. The idea was floated that the Doctor would finally meet Wells in the ruins of Broadfell Prison, mainly because Davis wanted to give her a bigger role. Eventually, this was deemed unnecessary and a bit self-indulgent, so AMNN's biggest star was reduced to her usual cameo spot instead. But we're still holding out a sneaky bit of hope that we may well see Trinity Wells again in the upcoming weeks. Number 16, Moffat shot down the Daleks. Of the 4 regular series finales Davis oversaw, 3 of them involved the Daleks as one of the main villains. It stands to reason that he would want to include the diabolical dustbins in his final crescendo, but he didn't count on one thing: the intervention of a middle-aged Scotsman. Davis originally wanted the returning Time Lords to team up with their greatest foes to show just how far they'd fallen, but new showrunner Stephen Moffat was having none of it. Moffat asked Davis not to include the Daleks as he wanted their appearance in Victory of the Daleks to feel as fresh as possible. Not wanting to undermine his successor, RTD removed them from the story. Oh, what a nice chap he is. Number 15. The crew tricked Tenant for one final surprise. After filming his dizzying skydive, David Tennant was officially done as the 10th Doctor. Or so he thought. Because he's an all-round diamond geezer, the crew wanted to do something special to mark Tennant's departure. So they called him back onto set after his final shot under the pretense that they needed him for a final lighting reference. Tennant knew this was a load of rubbish, but he went along with it anyway. Back on set, the crew threw their star one last surprise, sending him off with a round of applause and a blast of confetti so big it could have stunned an Azorbeloff from 20 paces. Cue a very emotional Tenant telling everyone how proud he was to have worked on the show and thanking them all for their hard work. I'm not crying, you're crying. Number 14. The alternate titles. The End of Time is such a perfect name for a Doctor Who story that it's amazing to think it hadn't already been done. It's a grand statement befitting such a monumental finale and has many different interpretations. Is it the end of the Doctor's time? The end of the Time War? The end of time as a concept? It's genius! Originally, however, Davis wanted the title to be the Immortality Gate, in reference to the device at the centre of the action. Other potential names included The Final Days of Planet Earth, which is pretty good to be honest, The Final Battle, a bit bland, The Final Reckoning, also bland, and Death of the Doctor, which is just way too literal. Although he did get to use that particular title later when he penned the Sarah Jane Adventures story of the same name, and somehow that wasn't so literal. Number 13. Cribbins' own life inspired a monologue. How dare Bernard Cribbins lure us all into a false sense of security with decades of novelty songs and bedtime stories, only to drop one of the finest dramatic performances in British TV at the age of 80. Wilfred Mott's heart-wrenching conversation with the Doctor aboard the Vinvoce ship is preceded by him reminiscing about his time in the army. He talks about his time in service in 1948 and about dodging a blizzard of bullets during a skirmish. Perhaps the reason Cribbins was able to deliver this monologue so well was because he wasn't acting, he was remembering. The blizzard of bullets he describes was an actual blizzard he endured while serving in real life, one of many extraordinary moments from his extraordinary history. Oh, I miss Bernard Cribbins. Number 12. June Whitfield really enjoyed her scenes. The group of pensioners known as the Silver Cloak is instrumental in uniting Ten with his final companion. One of the more memorable members of the gang is Minnie the Menace Hooper, played by the delightful June Whitfield. When the Silver Cloak gathers round the Doctor for a photo, she senses an opportunity and grabs Ten's bum, eliciting some great comedic delivery from David Tennant. Whitfield really went for it in this scene. Producer Julie Gardner described her approach as very method, while director Euros Lynn said that they had to stop her getting carried away as she wanted 2 big handfuls of that Time Lord booty. Don't lie, if you had the chance to get a slice of Gallifrey's finest cake, then you do the exact same thing. Number 11. It was almost a body swap story. Freaky Friday, 13 going on 30, the first live-action Scooby-Doo movie. Oh, what a film. These cinematic classics have one thing in common: people swapping bodies. The End of Time nearly joined that list, as one of the initial ideas was to have the Doctor and the Master swap bodies, presumably so the evil Time Lord could do something nefarious like scribble over the Doctor's clothes in marker pen. What a fiend. This wacky notion was scrapped when RTD realised it would involve John Sim playing the Doctor and David Tennant playing the Master, and he didn't want Tenant playing any other character during his big farewell. Also, it might have come across like a redux of New Earth, where Cassandra hops from body to body, and nobody needed to see the Doctor beating out a Samba again. Number 10. Tenant rapped on a fitting Slate number. As much as we'd all like to believe that TV shows are filmed in the order that we see them in, it's actually one big jumbled mess behind the scenes. As mentioned, the final scene involving David Tennant was him falling through the air, ready to crash through the glass roof of Naismith's mansion. On the clapperboard for this scene, the Slate number, which changes every time there's a new setup, was 999, the phone number you call in the UK if you need a fire engine, a police car, or a doctor. You couldn't make it up, could you? Number 9. Return of the Zogs. When Russell T Davies was working on Doctor Who's return to television, he made sure to outline one very important point in his pitch. He wanted to make the show more human, more relatable, and less about the random goings-on in some galaxy far, far away. Or, as he so eloquently put it, if the Zogs on planet Zog are having trouble with the Zog monster, who gives a toss? Little did he know that several years later those words would return to him in an unlikely way. The scene where the Doctor visits Captain Jack Harkness takes place in the wonderfully named Zagat Zagoo bar, which is located on the planet Zog. Yep, in the final script of his first tenure, Davies made an incredibly inside baseball reference to where it all began. Number 8. John Simm's significant credit. Alongside all the standout work from David Tennant and Bernard Cribbins, it's easy to forget that The End of Time contains another knockout performance from John Simm. Simm was brought back for one last go-around as the Doctor's unhinged arch-enemy, well, until he came back again in Series 10, but shh. And due to his large role, his name appeared in the opening title sequence. This made him only the second person in Doctor Who history to appear in the titles for playing a villain, after Eric Roberts beat him to the punch in the 1996 TV movie. So not quite a gold medal for Simm, but it's still very impressive. You know who else's name never appeared in the opening credits until their last appearance? Alex Kingston. Why did River Song never appear in the opening credits? Jack Harkness did. John Barrowman's name appeared in the credits when he was in an episode. Why was Alex Kingston not? Ugh, it bugs me. Number 7. Verity's cameo was nearly cancelled. During the carousel of goodbyes the Doctor goes on before his regeneration, he stops off at a bookshop to pay a visit to someone very special. Verity Newman is the great-granddaughter of Joan Redfern, the nurse Ten fell in love with while disguised as a human in Series 3. Newman is played by Jessica Hines, who also played Joan, but her appearance almost didn't happen. Hines was in a Broadway play that coincided with proposed filming dates for the episode, but instead of cancelling her cameo, her scene was filmed long before anything else and was the very first thing taped for The End of Time. Had Hines not been available, it was suggested to replace her with Elton Pope and Ursula Blake from Love and Monsters. Can you imagine how that would have gone down? Although I am curious as to whether she's still a paving slab. Number 6. It was almost broadcast on a single day. The second instalment of The End of Time did something that Doctor Who hadn't done since 1977. Air on New Year's Day. The first instalment kept the New Who tradition of airing on Christmas Day, forcing fans to wait an agonising week for the conclusion. The stress at the time was unbearable. Said stress would have been alleviated had one of the original ideas gone ahead, which was to put out both episodes on Christmas Day. The BBC had previously done this with EastEnders, but this time around they weren't having it, and the Christmas/New Year split was chosen instead. Davies was then forced to remove most of the Christmas-related references from Part 2, which makes you wonder if Rassilon was initially going to be wearing a Santa hat when he came through the portal. Number 5. Certain ideas weren't new. With RTD believing The End of Time was his final story in charge of Doctor Who, he took the opportunity to use some ideas he'd been holding on to for a while. The Hesperus dogfight sequence was borrowed from an early draft of Planet of the Dead, while the aforementioned Zagat Zagoo scene, essentially Doctor Who's Mos Eisley Cantina, was initially conceived for The Stolen Earth and Journey's End, as was the return of Russell Tovey's Alonzo. Meanwhile, the Doctor revealing to Sylvia that he bought Donna's lottery ticket with money borrowed from her late husband Jeff was a tribute to actor Howard Atfield, who was supposed to return in Series 4 but passed away at the start of production. Number 4. Matt Smith does what to the TARDIS console? Back to the Smithster in his first steps into the role of the Doctor as the newly regenerated 11 attempts to stop the TARDIS from crashing. Spoiler alert, he fails and ends up bumping into young Amelia Pond's garden. While he's flailing away at the TARDIS's console, eagle-eyed viewers might be able to spot that he randomly spits on his so-called wife during the mayhem. First of all, why? And second of all, why? Well, it turns out there's quite a valid reason. As the TARDIS set crumbled around him, some of that debris managed to get into Smith's mouth. He was simply getting rid of it, which the cameras managed to catch. And hey, his taste buds were new. He didn't know if he liked TARDIS debris yet. Number 3. Donna's role was originally smaller. Though Wilfred Mott serves as the companion for these episodes, Catherine Tate's Donna Noble also makes a sizable appearance. Tate was initially penciled in for a minor cameo during the epilogue, to show that Donna had managed to live a good life despite her tragic exit in Series 4. Her role was later expanded to include more dialogue and her confrontation with the Masters in the alleyway before she got her spot in the epilogue as intended. And that was the last time she ever appeared in Doctor Who, until it was revealed that she'd be appearing in the 60th anniversary specials. Turns out it wasn't Journey's End after all. Number 2. John Sim's insane number of costumes. Prior to him realising he was merely a bleached blonde pawn in Rassilon's game, the Master was actually successful in his diabolical plan, which doesn't often happen for Doctor Who villains. So well done there, buddy. Gold star, or white point star, whatever. The idea of the Master race was certainly interesting on paper, but in practice it presented a gigantic headache for John Sim, who had to portray every single other version of himself. As well as his bedraggled hoodie-wearing form, Sim had to play the Master in suits, army uniforms, dresses, lab coats and more, which meant a monumental number of costume changes. According to producer Julie Gardner, Sim underwent 32 costume changes in the space of 4 hours, which is 8 per hour. He must have been absolutely knackered. No wonder he was half skeleton by the end. Number 1. Those final words were a long time coming. I don't want to go. With 5 words, David Tennant sent millions of people around the world into fits of uncontrollable sobbing as he bowed out of the role with incredible vulnerability. It was humbling to watch the almighty Doctor be reduced to such a state in his final moments, and this was an idea that Davis had been holding onto for a long time. Though the first draft of the Part 2 script was completed in March 2009, the writer had come up with the 10th Doctor's final words 18 months earlier during a scripting session for Partners in Crime in September 2007. Imagine sitting on an emotional landmine of that magnitude for so long, knowing the anguish it was going to cause when you finally set it off. He's going to devastate us in the 60th, isn't he? I don't think I'm ready. Ho ho ho! Merry Christmas! Yeah, nothing else really to say other than Doctor Who is back at Christmas and we wanted a Christmassy video, so we thought, you know what? Let's break down this absolute banger of an episode, and here we are. I'm Ellie for Who Culture, here with 20 things you didn't know about A Christmas Carol. Number 20. It's the first Christmas special where nobody dies. What do you think of when you think of Christmas? Family gatherings, chocolate, a sense of generosity and giving? Well, if you work on Doctor Who, you probably think of death and mayhem. Since the first Doctor Who Christmas special in 2005, these episodes have brought plenty of bloodshed to the big day. All the Sycorax get blown up, Lance and his Spider Queen are done away with, Voyage of the Damned kills pretty much everyone on the Space Titanic, there are a bunch of cyber conversions in The Next Doctor, and the Master eats some homeless people in The End of Time Part 1. While it's implied that Abigail dies soon after, nobody's death is actually shown in A Christmas Carol, which was a first at the time. Well, except for that little fishy wishy that got eaten by the shark. Oh, poor little guy. We spoke about a few other Doctor Who Christmas specials there, but I want to know what's your favourite. Let us know in the comments down below. I would say, for obvious reasons, that one of mine has probably got to be The Husbands of River Song. Number 19. Sardic Town was built from colony ships. The bulk of the action in A Christmas Carol is set in Sardic Town, named after the powerful Sardic family. It's not a particularly jolly place, reflective of its miserly owner, with everything seemingly built out of scrap iron and discarded metal, and there's a reason for this. On the episode of Doctor Who Confidential that accompanied A Christmas Carol, set decorator Julian Luxton explained that the original settlers in Sardic Town arrived via huge ships, which they then broke down and used to build everything. Whether this was always the plan or not, it adds an additional layer of character to the settlement. Its first inhabitants literally built it from the ground up with what little materials they had. Number 18. The shark had a code name. Because an episode featuring the Doctor, Dumbledore and an opera singer wasn't weird enough already, Stephen Moffat decided to add another surreal element to the special, a flying shark. This shark ends up saving the day as the Doctor uses the half of the sonic screwdriver stuck inside it to help dissipate the clouds. The crew went to great lengths to keep this element of the story a surprise, even going as far as to come up with a code name for the creature. Lawrence Belcher, the actor who played young Kazran, decided on this name, and he chose Clive. The shark was called Clive. This allowed the crew to say Clive instead of Shark in order to better protect the secret. It's a good job they didn't call it Bruce, because they may have given the game away. Number 17. Moffat wrote the script in unusual circumstances. In the first half of 2010, air travel across Europe was thrown into chaos when a volcano in Iceland erupted, billowing clouds of ash into the sky. This gigantic earth sneeze meant that flights were cancelled left, right and centre out of fear that aircrafts might be damaged. Thousands of people people were affected by this, including a certain Scottish showrunner. Along with Matt Smith and Karen Gillan, Stephen Moffat was on a press tour in America around the time of the eruption. Left stranded, he decided to distract himself by writing the script for what would become A Christmas Carol. There was just one problem. He was in Los Angeles, and it was sweltering. Hardly the most Christmassy place on Earth. To get into the festive spirit, Moffat kept his air conditioning on full blast and listened to nothing but Christmas songs all day. He must have hated Mariah Carey by the end of that process. Number 16, Arthur Darvill gets an upgrade. The man behind the lovable Rory Williams was largely absent from the first half of Series 5, before picking up more regular roles towards the end of its run. Most of them involved him dying, but they still count. He's not in A Christmas Carol much, but he'd clearly become an integral part of this Tardis team by this point. As a result, Arthur Darvill's name appears in the show's opening credits for the very first time, making him the 16th different actor to appear in New Who opening title sequences. Making the title sequence is nothing to sniff at, but if Darvill could have chosen when to make his debut, he probably would have picked an episode where he had just a little bit more to do. Number 15, the spaceship copied the Enterprise. Outside Sardic Town, the other main location in A Christmas Carol is the starliner Thrasymachus. That's also the name of a real-life Greek philosopher and teacher, so there's another fun fact for you. And it wasn't just history that this craft borrowed from, as it also took inspiration from a fellow classic sci-fi show. The bridge of the ship where Amy and Rory speak to the Doctor in their funny honeymoon outfits was designed to replicate various different incarnations of the Enterprise from Star Trek. This could be because the first J.J. Abrams directed Star Trek movie had come out the year before, so it was fresh in the Doctor Who team's minds. Either way, the similarities are clear. Number 14, Abigail's song was very last minute. A Christmas Carol featured a marvellous performance from Catherine Jenkins, a classical singer hailing from Wales. Basically, the show finally ran out of places in Wales to use, and so it started stealing its people instead. Jenkins was a big get for Doctor Who, so you'd have thought that the idea of getting her to sing a song would have been organised way in advance. Well, think again. While it was always in Moffat's script that Abigail would sing a new Christmas tune, composer Murray Gold wasn't informed until the very last minute. He had around 3 weeks to come up with the song before it was required for filming, which wasn't a lot of time for something like this, but he managed it. Still no sign of the Series 10 soundtrack though. Chop chop! Number 13, it aired on a brand new channel. The first episode of Doctor Who to air in high definition was the 2009 Easter special Planet of the Dead, because everyone really needed to see Lee Evans' face in the clearest resolution possible. However, that episode and every subsequent HD broadcast was shown on a channel just called BBC HD, which showed high-def content from all across the BBC. BBC One HD, which is dedicated entirely to HD content from the Beeb's main channel, didn't launch until November 2010, just in time for A Christmas Carol to be the first Doctor Who episode to grace its airwaves. Number 12, Michael Gambon didn't like his performance. Kazran Sardic was played by the late, great Michael Gambon, a veteran of stage and screen. He is easily one of the most high-profile actors to ever appear in Doctor Who, but sadly, according to the man himself, he sucked. At London Film and Comic Con in 2015, the former head of Hogwarts said that he wasn't very good as the Scrooge stand-in. I tried hard, but I couldn't quite get it, he went on to say, as the audience rebuked his claims. Considering that A Christmas Carol regularly appears near the top of polls of the best Doctor Who Christmas episodes, Gambon really had nothing to worry about. The outpouring of grief from Whovians following his death in September 2023 further cemented just how brilliant he was in the show. Number 11, seamless model work completed the rickshaw scene. A concept throughout the episode is people travelling via a shark-powered rickshaw, culminating in Kazran and Abigail's final night together as they soar through the skies of Sardic Town. Unfortunately, as all the real flying sharks were busy, the team had to get creative when filming these scenes. The bulk of them were captured using a life-size rickshaw set against a green screen, with the actors doing their best to pretend that they weren't just in a random warehouse. However, this setup made it impossible to film from underneath, which is where puppets and miniatures came in handy. A smaller version of the rickshaw was built along with marionette versions of the characters, which were used to film shots of the rickshaw from below. The illusion was then neatly completed in the editing suite. And just as a side note, this Matt Smith puppet is horrifying and will haunt your dreams. Merry Christmas! Number 10, it was Jenkins' first acting role. An early idea for A Christmas Carol was to have an actress mime along to Abigail's song, which the producers hoped might be sung by Catherine Jenkins. However, somebody clearly remembered that old adage about killing birds with stones, and Jenkins was invited to appear as Abigail Abigail herself. The Welsh soprano was understandably quite nervous to take on the role, as her appearance in one of the biggest TV events of the year would be her very first acting gig. While she had appeared on TV before as herself, including an Emmerdale cameo, this was the first time she had taken on an actual character. Since A Christmas Carol, she has acted in a TV adaptation of the Dylan Thomas play Under Milkwood and in a film with Johnny Depp. Not too shabby. Number 9, it's Matt Smith's most watched solo outing. Doctor Who Christmas specials usually pull in mammoth audiences, probably because everyone's too full of turkey to get up and change the channel. A Christmas Carol pulled some monster ratings, even by these standards. Over 12 million people tuned in to see if the Ponds would survive their honeymoon, making it the 4th most viewed episode of New Who up to that point. It's also the most watched episode to star Matt Smith as the 11th Doctor, more or less. The only other Matt Smith episode to draw a bigger crowd was The Day of the Doctor, but since that also featured David Tennant's return as 10, A Christmas Carol remains Smith's biggest audience on his own. Number 8, Sardic Town was a steel mill. Is it really an episode of Doctor Who if it doesn't feature a location that's been used for the show about 100 times already? To add to the industrial feel of Sardic Town, it was decided that filming would take place at an actual steel mill in Wales. Where else, obviously. Mere Steel is located in the southern Welsh town of Newport and served as the backdrop for most of the external action in A Christmas Carol. The show had previously travelled there during the filming of Series 4's Journey's End, where it served as the inside of the Dalek Crucible. It also turned up in Planet of the Dead, where it doubled as the Tritavor spaceship, and in The Wedding of River Song as the docks of Callisto B. Number 7, Gambon wasn't the only one with a double role. Maybe Michael Gambon thought that he didn't do very well because he was exhausted from playing 2 different parts. Not only did he appear as Kazran, he also played his cruel father, Elliot, the man who set in motion his son's wicked ways. It makes sense that the crew wanted to get as much Gambon as they could, but he wasn't the only one pulling double duty. Young Bailey Pepper appeared first as Benjamin's son, the kid who lobs some coal at Kazran's head, and then later as the younger version of Benjamin who enjoys Christmas dinner with the 11th Doctor, Kazran and Abigail. Funnily enough, Pepper had appeared in an episode of the BBC soap opera Doctors the year before he was in Doctor Who. It's all connected. Number 6, Jenkins was nervous about the kissing. Having never had a proper acting job before, Jenkins was in for plenty of new experiences on the set of A Christmas Carol. I mean, there probably weren't flying sharks backstage at Emmerdale. Probably. Of all the things to be worried about though, there was one in particular that she was most concerned with. The kissing scene with young Kazran actor Danny Horn. My mum's got to watch that on Christmas Day, she told Digital Spy, explaining that she felt more nervous about getting this scene right than she did before singing to the Pope 7 years earlier. Luckily, Matt Smith was on hand to make sure everything ran smoothly. Oh, no, wait, no, he intentionally kept messing up the shot so they had to do extra takes. According to Jenkins, her and Horn ended up locking lips for about 90 minutes. Number 5, everything's round for a reason. What are the round things? Well, in this episode, they're everything. Sardic Town isn't just special because Michael Gambon and Catherine Jenkins live there. It's special because the human inhabitants share their world with shoals of floating fish. As well as Clive the shark, there are smaller fishies dotted around the town, gathering round lampposts and swimming through the sky. This gave the production team an interesting job to create a world that felt right for both humans and their flying friends. The answer? Round things. Almost all the windows, light fittings, and even some of the buildings in Sardic Town are circular or semicircular. Rather than lazy production design, this was done on purpose to evoke the feeling of being in a submarine, one of the closest experiences human beings can get to living underwater. Next time you watch A Christmas Carol, you won't be able to unsee this. Number 4, the new production designer had a Who connection. There's been a lot of chat about sets on this list, so it's high time the man who was in charge of designing them got a name check. Michael Pickwoad joined Doctor Who as its production designer following the departure of Edward Thomas, who had been part of the show since its return in 2005. No pressure then. Luckily, Pickwoad was in a great position to take the reins, as Doctor Who was in his blood. His father, an actor named William Mervyn, played Sir Charles Summer in the 1966 First Doctor serial The War Machines. Pickwoad also passed the Doctor Who bug down to his children, as his daughter Katie painted the portraits of Elliot Sardic and Abigail. One of Michael's other daughters, Amy Pickwoad, also worked as an art director on Doctor Who. Isn't that just the cutest thing? A whole family of Doctor Who creators. Number 3, the Doctor has a history of card tricks. The Christmas dinner scene sees the 11th Doctor try and fail to perform a card trick. It's interesting that the Doctor is so bad at it, considering all the practice he's had over the years. In the 4th Doctor serial Robot, the Doctor takes the stage, does a little dance, and then successfully performs a rather unusual card trick, much to the crowd's delight. right. In the Ninth Doctor's debut episode, he's just as bad as the 11th Doctor, spilling cards all over Rose's living room floor after attempting to shuffle the deck. It's always fun to see the Doctor attempt these very human things, though it does make you wonder why someone with such infinite wisdom can't always pull them off. Number 2. Kazran's mansion was inspired by Citizen Kane. Though the character of Kazran Sardic is modelled on Ebenezer Scrooge, another fictional icon also played a part in shaping his portrayal. Kazran keeps himself locked away from the world in a giant mansion overseeing the rest of the town. This is similar to how Charles Foster Kane, the title character of the classic movie Citizen Kane, built himself an enormous fortress to hide from the rest of society. Kane's house served as the inspiration for Kazran's own lonely home. The gigantic fireplace set was almost entirely copied, as was the ominous portrait that hung over it. Despite not being an original idea, it was effective in communicating to the audience how a life of greed can lead to misery, as it did for Sardic, Scrooge, and Kane. Number 1. Stephen Moffat's strange fear of sharks. Movies and TV shows haven't done sharks any favours, and it's no surprise that many people are scared of them. They've evolved over millions of years to be pure eating and killing machines. No excess, just teeth, fins, and a whole load of hungry energy. A young Stevie Moff knew this full well, as he was deathly afraid of them as a boy. In particular, he had a nightmare that sharks would one day evolve to come out of the sea and chase him around on land. And now you'll all have the same nightmare too. You're welcome! Presumably thinking he might as well make a bit of money out of his childhood trauma, Moffat turned his fear into a plot device for A Christmas Carol. There's where the idea of flying sharks came from, Moffat's very real phobia that they were coming to get him. Fingers crossed life never imitates art.